In Rhode Island, the blue violet blooms quietly, a symbol of wisdom, resilience, and hope. The Blue Violet Project carries that same spirit, calling us closer to see our unhoused neighbors with dignity, not with judgment. Too often, misconceptions take root, that homelessness is a choice, that solutions don't exist. But the truth is different. Solutions are possible. Change is possible. And when we lead with love instead of fear, we find a path forward for all of us. This is the road to home.
His name was Dave, and he was an EMT. So he's driving an ambulance, taking his patient to Newport Hospital, and a drunk driver crosses the center line and hits him head on at a very high rate of speed. His patient, who was strapped in, was launched toward the front of the ambulance. And it's unbelievable really, but he wound up hitting a pile of towels and was not injured at all. Dave, who was driving, nearly lost his right foot and had very severe spinal injuries. So much for his career as an EMT. And this was back around the dot-com boom. He actually got a job in a computer company until the dot-com bust. Then he lost his job. He couldn't find a job after that. He couldn't work at McDonald's because he couldn't stand for long periods of time. Wound up unemployed. His family, his father was an abusive alcoholic. All of his siblings also were alcoholics. And when he blew the whistle on his father, they all kicked him out of the house. So he no longer had the support of his family. So this is what often happens. You lose your job, you don't have a source of income. He wasn't on disability at that point, and he had no help from his family. So he was living in his car for a long time, and this is what happens to people too. His car eventually broke down. He didn't have the money to get it repaired. It got towed. Once it gets towed, you cannot get into your car unless you have the money to get it out of the lot. He didn't have that, so he lost everything. Literally everything. He didn't even have his birth certificate. He had nothing except the clothes on his back. He wound up at Crossroads. He eventually got a room there and was doing well and was part of the advocacy movement that I'm a part of. He used to come to my classes and talk about his story. And one of the things he said in my class was, if he ever lost access to painkillers, he would kill himself. And that's what happened. A doctor labeled him as drug-seeking, as if he needed, painkillers to live. The doctor cut him off, and he threw himself off of the Providence Place Mall parking lot and killed himself. So just a story, because generally people are homeless because of bad luck. A series of misfortunes, and then for some reason they can't get help from their family or friends, or they use up that resource, and that's how they wind up on the street.
Hi, my name's Marie Booten. I am the coordinator for the meal site in Woonsocket for May organization.
I'm Toonie Shartner. I am the executive director of the May organization for the homeless.
My name is Anthony. I was homeless for 2.5 years. I had a good life before that.
Good morning. My name is Laura Jaworski. I have the honor of serving as the executive director for House of Hope CDC.
So I'm Oscar Perez. I'm the chief of police for the city of Providence.
My name's Eric Hirsch. I'm a professor in the sociology department at Providence College.
My name's Jake Bazillion. I represent Senate District 1 in the Rhode Island Senate, and I also serve as CEO of Justice Assistance. I heard about Rhode Island's housing crisis, which has been laid bare at our state's doorstep over the last couple of years in a number of different ways. And really, I like to talk about three different numbers as it relates to Rhode Island's housing crisis, because it really touches all folks up and down the socioeconomic ladder. First and foremost, at any given time in this year, about 2,500 of our neighbors will experience homelessness, right, at any given point in time. Next, when we talk about affordable housing, which means deed-restricted housing for individuals that are making a certain percentage of area median income, we need about 20,000 more units of what we say is deed-restricted affordable housing. And throughout the state of Rhode Island, we have 150,000 households that are housing insecure or housing cost burden, which means that 33% or more of their disposable income goes towards their housing costs. So that all results in a number of different things, not the least of which is a system in chaos, system which makes it difficult for individuals to find a place that they can call home, that is not only at times their dream home, but also maybe just a place that is warm, safe, and dry, and safe for human habitation. So it's a big crisis. At times it can feel amorphous and tough to define, but that's why I always like to use those three numbers so people understand that the housing crisis means different things to different people, but it's something that is ubiquitous and touches every corner of our state.
If I could look someone in the eye and introduce kind of homelessness in a different way to them, it would depend on the person. 7 out of 10 Americans live paycheck to paycheck. That means approximately 70% of Americans are at risk of being homeless. They're suffering from housing insecurity or food insecurity.
There's a lot of things, in fact, that folks get wrong, and they are things like people are enjoying or otherwise want to stay homeless and have chosen this experience. So we've seen folks come into shelter and be very willing to not only come in and stay, but the other misconception is that people don't want help. And so we've seen, as I mentioned, people coming into shelter, but every single individual has been working and engaging with the case management on site, which is here to support and ultimately execute on that housing as a basic human right and get folks into housing. And so we've already seen 5 individuals realize that goal of moving into housing. And so we're very excited and proud of that because we're also not only transforming lives by providing a home, but we're also breaking misconceptions.
The most important thing that people get wrong about homelessness is that they focus on the characteristics of people who are homeless. And generally they wind up concluding that there must be something about them, like maybe, oh, this person's a drug addict, or this person uses too much alcohol, or they have a criminal background, and so that's why they're homeless. What they're missing is that we have a housing market that is broken, that is not serving literally the majority of households in the state. The majority of households in the state cannot afford to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. So they should be focused more on the system and the failure of the government to pick up the slack for that broken housing market.
Yeah, sometimes they see it as as someone who's involved in the criminal activity, part of the criminal element when they see the homeless people. Some people think that they are individuals who are there just to cause harm and disturb peace and quality of life. And they don't realize that it's just humans. And I think as humans, we should have respect for humanity. And they don't realize that you don't know the circumstances of why that person ended up being homeless. It could be a family structure, it could be mental illness, it could be substance abuse, it could be many different factors. I don't think there's anyone who, when they're born, they pick, as soon as they come out of their mother's womb, to be homeless. It's just circumstances of life. And I've always been a person that, whether you're on top or at the bottom, I think everybody just sees the glory or the sufferingness, but then they don't know the story. So I would say, you may know the glory, but you don't know the story. So you have to always respect humanity and respect people for who they are not because of your perception or your bias of what you observe. So
people often get wrong is also something that people are learning more and more, which is the changing face of homelessness and the reasons why people are ending up in a position where they're experiencing homelessness. Historically, and this is what the experts will tell you, it may sound pejorative, but historically, oftentimes the face of homelessness in the state of Rhode Island was a middle-aged to aging white male, oftentimes had a military background, oftentimes was suffering from a substance use or a mental health disorder or a confluence thereof. And a lot of times when folks of particular generations think about homelessness, that's what they visualize in their head, whether it's the individual that's finding habitation under a bridge or what have you. But right now, the changing face of homelessness is oftentimes now a single mom with kids who's having to shelter in her car because the cost of living has just gotten well beyond them. And oftentimes they're working multiple jobs just to keep pace with the cost of living, the cost of housing, that is. And so what Crossroads and other folks, the experts, if you will, that are responsible for building out the continuum of care to assist individuals experiencing homelessness want us to know and want us to appreciate is really more and more folks of all sorts of walks of life are being driven into homelessness because of the rising cost of housing.
So it's actually really simple. Put someone in an apartment immediately. And that approach is called housing first. And it really came from homeless people who said, what are all these programs? Just give me an apartment.
Housing to give these people. You can't live in a tent like that. I tried it. I lived under a bridge. It doesn't work. So yeah, it's housing they need.
A housing first model, definitely, with low barriers to entry. No knock on anyone that may have barriers to entry for their whether it's a sober house or something like that. I really believe that there's room for everyone at the table when it comes to solving this problem. But housing first models with low barriers to entry. We oftentimes, the housing issue as it manifests for us, particularly when we talk about homelessness, these are the hardest to house individuals now. Oftentimes mental health disorders, substance use disorders, the confluence thereof. And so kind of stripping down and putting them in a stable housing situation that doesn't require them to maybe disrupt too much of the little daily life that they still have order over is critically important. So that's what I believe works, but also resources to provide a number of different models is helpful.
Before we even get involved, before the Providence Police gets involved, when we get those type of calls, we load it up with those agencies in that team to go down there, provide advice, counseling for psychological issues, counseling for substance abuse, counselors for homeless, counseling or different agencies like Crossroads who get involved.
Everything that we do at House of Hope is rooted in the belief that housing is a basic human right. And so every single thing that we do day in and day out at our organization is in service of that vision and value.
I think everything we do, May, M-A-E means mother in Portuguese, and everything we do is through that lens of kind of a mother's love and support. We are non-judgmental, we meet everyone where they're at, and we really are able to provide a very individualized, customized support program depending on each individual or family's unique needs.
My Rhode Island looks like a place where the last thing someone has to worry about is where they're going to go when their day is done. I want everyone to have that feeling of knowing where their things are, knowing where they're going, knowing that they are going to be safe, their valuables are going to be safe, and that they are deserving of a place to be, because they are. And I really feel that we have a responsibility to provide that to one another as a core human value. And so my Rhode Island looks like a place where the last thing anyone has to worry about is meeting their basic needs.
So we're talking about a statewide issue, a huge problem, something as nebulous and amorphous as housing. And if I were to tell you that if we built 2,000 to 3,000 more permanent supportive units of housing, you could solve homelessness in a state, I mean, that's really incredible. So what I love about Rhode Island is, we can measure things, and nothing that we can't measure is, isn't beyond our control. So that's what I think makes Rhode Island special, is we can quantify things, and then because of our size, they're usually within our control, we can deal with them.
On this sign here, it's like all are welcome. So somehow get to the point where not in my backyard is no longer, the problem. That people understand that it's their neighbors who need housing.
Talking to people. When you drive up to a corner and there's someone standing there, maybe say hello. Don't look the other way like they're not existing.
If you either came from a urban inner city core neighborhood or you're an affluent person who inherited a lot, just to remember that whatever you can do for others will make a tremendous impact in our state and in our city. And so just throw your 2 cents and help others, because at some point in your life, you may need that same assistance.
All of these people are very loving and kind. They have their moments, but every one of them deserves kindness.
The important thing is to recognize them, because so many people treat them as if they're trash to be removed. That's dehumanizing, and homeless people see that immediately if that's what you're doing. So don't treat people as if they're subhuman.
We should all care for one another. They are not like this for no reason. Their lives, they were either introduced to it as a child, or they, had life things happen to them.
Actually seeing people and trying to work to restore dignity. And so whenever anyone asks me how can they help, I don't start with donations of money or goods or items or things. We start with first seeing people as people and really recognizing someone's human existence. So many times we hear that people are looked over and ignored, and it's heartbreaking as a human being to hear that. And so, when we launched, Shower to Empower 7 years ago, our mobile shower truck that is providing showers, haircuts, medical navigation support, and case management services in 5 days a week, 4 communities across the state. What we see is people who have been really worn down and ignored and looked past and forgotten. And when people go into those showers, you can see them beat down, and when they come out, they're a completely changed person. And they say things like, now my outsides match my insides. People have ignored me, looked past me, crossed the street to avoid me, and now I actually feel like I'm a human being and I belong in this universe.
I ended up in South Providence on the street, shelter. Amos House got me an apartment over here 1.5 years ago on Main Street, and I was in there in 6 weeks. You don't normally get an apartment in 6 weeks. So I struggled, I got beat up, I got robbed, and I feel bad for the people that are still out there. What I do now is when I have clothes and food and money, I go down the embankments to the encampments they have, and I try to help those people out because they help me.
Everyone deserves a road to home.
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 We organize a society, so we should be able to set minimums: food, housing, health care. I mean, come on, let's do it.